Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Punching Left. I am your host, AJ Wilms, joined here with Mike Lauber. And wow, Dublin is looking a lot different than I remember it. Been to, although I've actually never been to Ireland. I've been to Scotland once. And I mean, Scotland, Ireland, they're pretty much the same country, right? But I remember Scotland looking not really like that. And I know some people who live in Ireland, and I think they would be shocked to think that that's what their capital city looks like.
Yeah, were those Ukrainian refugees there?
Yeah, probably, right? Probably. And it's crazy because you saw in there in that opening video, some of the people there have like 10 kids. Like that one woman that's just standing on the street not doing anything, and there's all these children, there's strollers and like car seat looking things. Like there's just so many kids all over. And these people who come to this country, they're having like how many kids? Dozens sometimes, it seems.
Yeah, and if they like don't speak the language and can't contribute to society, like why do they keep bringing them in? I mean, this is what's really hurting Europe right now is there's no social cohesion because
Oh
they
yeah.
just end up on the welfare rolls.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And even if they do get a job or whatever, they expect everyone to assimilate to their culture, right? I mean, I remember I worked, this is obviously in the America in the US here, but I worked with someone who was Egyptian, and he was like getting mad at people for not being like Arab enough to talk to him. And it's like you moved to America and now you're mad that people aren't being more Arabic when speaking with you, or when, learning social norms that are acceptable for you.
Well, that's the way it is, unfortunately. People used to come here to be Americans. A lot of people I know, relatives and other people that immigrated here, that's why they came. They wanted the freedoms and the other things that the US offered that their home country didn't. But now it's economic migration and people coming here
Yeah.
strictly for welfare benefits. I mean, I realize this is obviously not the US, but still.
Oh
So
yeah, but and it is like the same across the board in Europe because Europe and America are so wealthy. All of the Commonwealth nations are. But the reason why they're wealthy is because the people who made these countries were innovators and settlers and could build something great. I mean, it's not like America was always a wonderful place of riches when the natives lived here and then the Europeans just stole all the technology from them. I mean, I don't even think they had the wheel figured out by the time we got here. And it's because our nations are so fantastic. Part of the reason why that is because of the people who make them up. What we're doing now is we're replacing the people who made these countries great with foreign peoples, and these people want to come because our countries are awesome, understandably so. But the issue is what can you contribute to make this country a better place, and what obligation do we have to allow you in, whether or not you can contribute?
yeah, because this isn't like the best and brightest. If this was doctors coming in from India or wherever, then at least they are contributing something and they're doing jobs that we need to fill. But the issue is when you have mass migration where there's no requirements, which literally just anybody that says they want asylum and they get it, then we're getting people that aren't they're not building us up. They're not even filling like low income entry level jobs that
Yeah.
we're also struggling to fill. Instead, it's just welfare benefits. There's language barriers. They're not even trying. They're having tons and tons of kids, which means we're paying even more to keep them here. So we're basically just absorbing the costs, making things easy for them, but it's hurting all of us.
Of course, yeah, and it does benefit the elite who get either the votes from them or the cheap labor from them. In the case of these people who own these mega large companies, and it's funny. It reminds me of that meme where the person's like, when you look at refugees, you think they're people who will be on welfare and food stamps. But when I look at refugees, I see doctors, lawyers, engineers, and then someone replies and they're like, well, can you tell these refugees to get out of the way so I can see them too?
Yeah, so I can see the doctors and lawyers. Are they behind them?
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, and it's kind of true because how many people coming here, especially as refugees or asylum seekers, are actually becoming like super productive members of society who actually contribute something tangible and of value to this nation? Like if you are a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or something like that.
Yeah, and again, that is what our system should be tailored towards. It's what Trump was trying to put in as an immigration
Right.
system that was a merit-based, point-based system.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we can't allow for some legitimate refugees, but again, we have to worry about ourselves
Sure.
first. With the border wide open right now, that is not what we're doing. We are not
Yeah.
bringing in people to help to build up America. Instead, we're bringing in people that are bringing us down.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's undeniable. We import, and the idea too that we can like help the third world by just like picking the third world up and then plunking them down in America, and somehow that makes everyone like better off or something. It's ridiculous. The only people who are harmed by this are American people, and even in some cases, the conditions of these people who come here are unaffected or just as bad, or especially with the case of illegal immigration, they get killed or raped along the way. I read something like half of all girls who come across the border, they just take birth control pills because they know they're going to get raped. It's just such a common occurrence to be raped by a coyote when you're crossing here illegally that every girl over the age of like 12 years old just takes a bunch of like birth control pills every day, so that because they just get raped so often that they just have to ensure that they're not going to get pregnant from that. So it's a procedural thing now for illegal immigrants to do that.
Yeah, that's insane. Well, speaking of insane, we also have we had a little bit of I don't know, what would you call this, political theater today in front of the Supreme Court.
Absolutely, yeah. Our favorite friend,
Two of them.
Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. I always say her name incorrectly because she wants to say it like Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, and I'm always saying it like a Southerner, like Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. AOC, as we know her by. She was getting into a little mischief with Ilhan Omar. Is that correct?
Yep, they decided to pretend to get arrested today in front of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, so this is AOC walking here, and as you can see, her hands are behind her back. Is she arrested? Doesn't look like she has handcuffs on her hand, and she's putting up a fist for Black Power or communism or whatever. Usually the fist in the air is associated with every movement I don't like. So whatever she's doing, it doesn't seem very good. And certainly one thing we know for a fact is she wasn't arrested. So why was she walking with her hands behind her back like that?
Yeah, and our next contestant here, this is Ilhan Omar, also pretending to be arrested.
So they must have planned this. They must have said to each other, "Hey, let's just make problems." And then, and by the way, when you're arrested, you don't walk ahead of the cops like that. And then she waves as well. What is up with this?
They're magic invisible. Maybe they just told her she had handcuffs on.
I don't
So
know. I mean, she's dumb enough that she might believe that even without them, actually being there.
yeah, so here's a shot of AOC pretending to have handcuffs on. And again, like the cop, so if the police officer is leading you away, they're going to at least keep a hand on you. Usually they try to
Yeah,
like hold onto your belt in case you decide to run.
right.
Um, but they probably wouldn't do that with a congressperson. But either way, it's all theater, it's all stage. And again, nobody on the mainstream media will bother to point this out that they were just making fools of themselves, pretending to be in handcuffs and drug away. Um, Instead, they'll be hailed as heroes somehow.
Oh yeah, exactly. And it's like they completely bring this on themselves. This is a abortion rally and they're making issues and the cops are like, "Hey, you can't do that." And they're just like, "Can you go away?" And then they're like, "Oh, I'm being arrested by the police." They're like, "Can you just please like leave us alone?" And they're like, "Okay, I'm going, officer. I'm going. I'm going, officer." It's like this, like you said, it's political theater.
Yeah. Well, and
And
this is
clearly, too, it must have been coordinated because both of them did the exact same thing, but they're not together. They were like, this was separate times that this happened, but they did the exact same thing.
yeah, and this is also today. There's been a push inside the House, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the rep's name. It's the same guy that thought Guam would capsize and flip over. Brought forward some legislation that to expand the Supreme Court by 4 seats, so that there can be a liberal majority.
Wow, yeah. That's insane to think that. I remember I was helping somebody I knew with a homework assignment they were doing there in college, and it was like, what's the most powerful branch in government? Is it the executive? Is it the judicial? Is it the legislative? And I'm like, the legislative has a lot of power because think of every check and balance they have, right? They can make laws or make bills and pass bills, but the president has to sign it. Yeah, but they can override the president's veto and just do whatever they want anyways. Like the executive branch is kind of irrelevant in their mission. And then it's like, well, the judicial branch keeps a check on them. Well, no, because they get to confirm every single justice. And guess what? They can put on like 50 justices if they want. They could put 100 justices on the court so that nothing ever gets done, and then they can operate with impunity. So, I mean, you're seeing this happen right now with Democrats becoming more and more powerful in the legislature. They're going to start using that power within Congress to affect the Supreme Court, to affect the executive branch and their authority, and to build themselves up to have more and more power as well.
Yeah, and the legislature, if we could actually control the legislature with a super majority, you really could. Biden would be irrelevant. So would the courts. Not that we'd have major problems with the Supreme Court right now, but you could push through anything you wanted. And Biden again is irrelevant. You pass it with 80 votes, than in the Senate, and what is it, 300 plus in the House. He can't veto anything anyway. You just override him.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's they have quite a lot of power, and we're going to see, when the Republicans have power in Congress, they don't use it, unfortunately, for like their political advantage. I mean, they do basic things, obviously, like passing tax reform and stuff like that. But when it comes to things like, hey, maybe we should stack the Supreme Court with like, Mike Lindell, as I've been advocating for months now, or we put Alex Jones on the Supreme Court or something like that. Instead of them playing hardball, they just say, oh, let's keep the status quo. Let's just keep the status quo. And then the liberals will say, well, let's use all the power that we can get to use it against our enemies and then reward our allies. And of course, our minds are blown when the liberals consistently get victories, maybe because they're the only ones fighting for victory. Conservatives are just fighting for status quo.
Yeah, exactly. And at this point, I put Alex Stein on the Supreme Court. Let's get Elena Kagan or Sotomayor out of there.
Yeah, absolutely.
At least
and they can impeach Supreme Court justices as well. Like if they wanted to, like really play hardball, if they had the votes for it, don't think for a second they wouldn't be impeaching every single conservative justice on the court. They would say, "Oh, Brett Kavanaugh, he was a rapist. Yeah, we're taking him off. Oh, Clarence Thomas, he's been on too long. Or he's a white supremacist. Take him off. Oh, Amy Coney Barrett, she's sexist. Take her off. Like they would use any excuse in the book just to get all these people off who their political enemies are. It's just that they don't currently have the power. As soon as they get enough power to do it, they will be.
Yeah, and look at like what the House of Representatives is using their power for right now, instead of addressing the inflation or the food shortages or any other problems that are affecting day-to-day Americans.
Yeah,
Americans
what is the House? The Republican-controlled House. What are they doing?
You mean Democrat-controlled House?
Oh yeah, sorry, it's the Democrat-controlled House and then the Republican Senate. And it's like, obviously the Democrats work tirelessly to destroy America, but it's like I said, the Republicans seem to just want to keep status quo and don't actually want to push forward any actual traditional values in this country.
Well, yeah, instead we're going to vote on a same-sex marriage bill because now they're terrified that the Supreme Court's going to take that up and eliminate state-by-state gay marriage bills, because there is still federally the Defense of Marriage Act, because in the decision that overturned Roe, Clarence Thomas mentioned, possibly revisiting other decisions like this. Now they're terrified. So they are going to try to codify this now.
I thought DOMA was overturned with a Supreme Court case. I'm blanking on the name of it, but it was two lesbian ladies from New York, and I thought they overturned it, but maybe it was just that the federal government couldn't apply it to the states, perhaps. But yeah, you're right that Clarence Thomas brought up that contraception and gay marriage and another Supreme Court case, they all should be up for discussion, whether or not they are truly constitutional issues or not. And by the way, they're not. Like the founding fathers did not say, oh, we really have to make sure that like condoms are mandated to all Americans or everyone has access to them. Like they would say that's a state issue. Same with marriage. Marriage was never, ever supposed to be something decided at a national level or something decided within the Constitution. The Constitution, you have your first 8 rights. The vast majority of them are just like your rights in court and then your right to free speech, privacy, and to bear arms. And after that, they say everything else, just leave it to the states. And if you don't like what your state's doing, go to another one, because I guarantee you, if they have any common sense, they're going to align with you. So just move there, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I really think that this is the root of a lot of our problems right now when it comes to social issues, is states are supposed to be deciding these things, that we weren't supposed to cede all this power to the federal government. Mm-hmm. And instead, we're seeing the opposite of that more and more. It's consolidated at the federal level, and the states are irrelevant. Instead, They want to use those as enforcement mechanisms for federal policy that the state doesn't want.
Yeah, and I mean, it's ridiculous to make the constitutional argument, because you could make the argument that well, it should be a federal issue or whatever, and that's one thing. But to argue it's a constitutional issue, clearly things like marriage, even things like drug use, like things like that is all just for the states to figure out, because it's not mentioned anywhere in the first 8 amendments. 9th and 10th amendments say, look, if it doesn't say it in the Constitution, you can do it unless your state says you can't do it. Basically meaning states get to make any law that is not said in the Constitution, as long as it does not violate any of the constitutional rights.
Yeah, exactly. And, it isn't just marriage that the Democrats in the House are trying to wreck. They're also preventing protections preventing increasing the penalties for child sex traffickers and sex offenders. So the House Judiciary Committee, the Dems vote unanimously to block measure that would have increased penalties for child sex traffickers. So at the same time, they're trying to expand or codify gay marriage rights now. They will not increase penalties for adults that abuse children.
And it's interesting, too, because I haven't seen the numbers on it, but I would think that now more than ever in American history, we probably have the most amount of child sex trafficking. And I mean, we saw the giant case with Jeffrey Epstein. And I mean, this is like a proven fact that it happened. that should have been a huge sign to Americans that these things happen in real life and these things are happening in America. And we need to clamp down and tighten down on the people who are doing this. But the Democrats are against this, like harsher penalties for some of the worst people that exist in our nation, who, by the way, constantly get away with the crimes that they commit. How many years did Ghislaine Maxwell get? Like 20 years or something like that. I know she got 10 years reduced by her judge during all these mass shootings in between them all.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I guess it's kind of hard to justify her time, 20 years for trafficking children to apparently no one. So
Right.
maybe that was her argument.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. To no one, because there's no names that we got.
Yeah. Well, they're not even pursuing charges on anybody, which is
And
as
it's
far as
terrible
we
because
know.
they have the black book, the FBI or whoever has access to the information. And I mean, they have her cell phone. They have Jeffrey Epstein's cell phone. There's absolutely no possible way that they can't find out the information on these deals
Yeah.
and shady stuff that were happening, right?
Well, they know who they are. I mean, they have all the information. There's copies of the black book that have been leaked onto the internet. So, I mean, you can find the whole client list, or at least you can find parts of it. I don't know if it's confirmed or not, but it's the information's out there, and we know who's involved from the flight logs and everything else. But the fact that they're not investigating or pursuing charges, I mean, that's really sick. And it is because it's a lot of political and media figures and
Yeah.
Hollywood people that they don't want investigated because they're all part of this, insiders club that they all feed off of.
Well, and look how many photos there are of Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein together and how many times he was on the jet. And like no one bats an eye at that. No one cares. No one does anything about it. And it just shows how high up this actually went to like the sitting president of the United States at the time. Like the guy who was running the White House was simultaneously like being the president of the free world and then at the same time flying to a child sex island to like rape kids. I mean, it sounds insane to say that out loud, but that's what was happening with Bill Clinton. It seems, at least, don't sue me for libel, it does seem like that based on the flight logs from the convicted child sex predator that was arrested, and his flight logs were leaked and you were on the flight several times. There's a lot of pictures of you with them. I mean, that seems kind of odd to me, and that kind of points towards one and only thing, if you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, he's on what 26 or 27 times, and they
Yeah.
dropped Secret Service protection, which again is
Yes.
very
Which
unusual.
never happens. They're never ever supposed to let you. Like even Obama, he wanted to. I remember watching this like a long time ago. Obama wanted to like drive around the White House, like on the White House property in his car, and the Secret Service wouldn't let the camera crew in alone. They got in the car, they followed the car, and it's within the gates of the White House, which is already secured and guarded. So the idea that Bill Clinton somehow could like get on a private airplane with some random guy and fly to a random island, like that would be unheard of with the Secret Service allowing that to happen.
Yeah, pretty much. But again, we know it happened 26 or 27 times. Sorry, I can't remember which.
Yeah. Well, so many, dozens and dozens. And that's only that we know of that have been written down and recorded. Who knows how many times things went on behind the scenes or that were documented and such? I mean, we don't know.
Yeah, or parties at either one of his mansions
Yes.
in New York or Florida.
Yes.
I think he had another estate somewhere else.
Because the 26, 27, however many flights that have been confirmed that are in the Jeffrey Epstein flight log that his pilot kept, that's just for flying on Jeffrey Epstein's one specific plane, right?
Well, that's just flights to the island in those flight
And
logs.
just to the island on the one specific plane, right? From
Yeah.
certain time periods. So yeah, like you just said, Mike, it's a great point. Who's to say that Bill Clinton didn't just go to New York on his own, like many presidents do, and then he just went to Jeffrey Epstein's house or one of his mansions, right?
Yeah, exactly. But again, like, nobody wants to talk about this. Even media doesn't cover it all, but we also know a lot of them are listed in this black book as well. So there is a lot of corruption, and that's kind of the idea is that you have blackmail on everybody. So it makes everybody, they all have a skin in the game to make sure the information doesn't come out.
Yeah, and it's in all different industries as well. I think people in academia, people who I'm sure go to Harvard and Stanford, and these influential people there, I'm sure they were involved in this or knew about it.
Yeah.
Politicians, of course, as we know, people in media. So who are you going to get the dissent from? Like media isn't going to break the story because the media is involved in it. The government's not going to pursue this because the government's involved in this. Law enforcement's not going to pursue it because law enforcement, the FBI, the CIA, these people were involved to some extent in this as well. At least the leadership or some of the leadership was. So, I mean, I've noted in the past, I've heard that even the attorney general of the U.S. was fired by Trump because he refused to try to pursue charges on Ghislaine Maxwell, which just goes to show that even at the very, very, very top, there's people saying, nah, I'm not messing with this lady. and they will give their entire career up. They will burn all their connections and all the bridges they have. They'll stop working for the president of the United States. They'll be like, nope, I'm retiring early. I don't care about my pension. I'm out of here. Just because they don't want to follow the legal procedure on a criminal, because they know what can happen to them if they do pursue those charges. So it goes to the very top.
People know what happens when you cross the Clintons. You mysteriously kill yourself. You shoot yourself in the head 3 times or 2 times and then put the gun in a suitcase.
Right. Yeah. Or kill yourself while, you shoot yourself in the head while handcuffed behind your back, or things like this. I mean, there's a lot of fishy stuff.
Your head falls off in the shower. Somebody
Right.
slid in the shower and decapitated themselves on a soap dish, allegedly.
Yeah. That's, I've heard too that if you have dirt on Hillary Clinton or the Clinton family, you're like 287 times more likely to kill yourself. I think that's the number.
Yeah, well, I mean, the memes are great. Like every time anybody dies, from like Harambe to Shinzo Abe, there's always the fake tweet of
Right. Yeah.
I have information that implicates Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I don't know. There may be some truth to that, because people do get killed in politics, unfortunately. And if you look at, it's interesting if you study within history, that happens quite often, even in recent history. Like I was reading about Erwin Rommel, who was this military general in Germany, and he was like this very highly esteemed general in World War I. He was a general in World War II in the African campaign for Germany, and he was like a hero because he was such a good general. Everyone liked him. But then apparently he was trying to do a plot to kill Hitler along with people, right? And Hitler found out about this, so he wanted to have him executed. But he was too popular with the people to execute. It would look like such an embarrassment that, like, oh, this awesome general who everyone loves wanted to kill our leader. Like, does that mean our leader's bad? So then Hitler basically coerced him into killing himself. He said, look, if you kill yourself, you get to keep your pension. Your family's going to be okay. You're not going to be executed. You'll be dead, but it's not going to be dishonorable. You won't be stripped of your military honors. So that's what he decided to do, killing himself. But I mean, that just goes to show that even, there are real life examples where we can look in even recent history where people have said, look, you're going to have to kill yourself, or we're going to make it look like you kill yourself because we want you out of here and you're causing issues.
Yeah, and the alternative, especially like when you start threatening family members or people around them or things they built up their whole life, that becomes a better option than giving in and taking your stand.
Right, exactly. And especially when you know how the media is in complete solidarity with the government a lot of the times. I mean, I saw the other day when Joe Biden was riding his like bicycle. He had the second time, not the time he fell, which we'll talk about more later. But the second time he was riding his bike, he didn't fall this time, as far as we know. But he's talking to the media, and they're like, "You look so cute in your helmet, Mr. President." And I'm like, how the heck? How is the media so in love with Biden? It's because they work together. If this was Trump, remember when Trump took the mental IQ test or whatever, and he got 100% on it, which most journalists couldn't do, and which like presidents in the past have done worse than him. And the media still said, no, he's not very smart. No, he cheated. No, he didn't do it right. And he took it a second time or whatever and did even better or whatever. It's like, people were criticizing him. The press was criticizing him so much, and they were totally out of line by doing that. Meanwhile, with Biden, he can't even ride a bicycle properly, and they're like, "Oh, you look so cute. Oh, chocolate chip ice cream. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You're hilarious." Time after time, they suck up to him, and that's because the walls between government and media are like falling apart, and they're one and the same. People say, "Well, I don't want a state media; it will be bad." The corporate media we have today is even worse than like the BBC or whatever in England.
Well, yeah, it's a completely sycophantic press.
Yeah,
and you're right. Like with the cognitive test, I remember when Don Lemon and Fredo Cuomo, they tried to take it on the air. They're making fun of him. I think they missed 2 questions.
Yes.
And then, they're making fun of Trump for, his perfect score, saying, "Oh, this is so easy. How could anybody mess this up?"
Yeah, and then his doctor came out too. It wasn't that he took the test again. It was his doctor came out himself and was like, "No, Trump is fine." And he was Obama's doctor too, and he was like, "No, Trump did great on the test. He's just as smart as anyone else I've ever tested with this. He's very competent. There's no monkey business that went on." But the media still, even after that, was ridiculing him totally unjustly.
Well, they're going after that doctor now too, the one that worked for the Obama administration, the Trump administration. He came out and spoke up about Biden, saying, he's obviously not cognitively there, and that he had questions about other medical conditions that he had too, that, this guy's a danger to us. He could drop at any moment. And instead, they started going after his medical license, and they're going after him publicly, trying to get him fired from whatever jobs he has now. or
It's
pulled
so
off
dumb.
boards. Yeah.
I mean, and it's like, clearly this guy is correct. Say what you will about Obama. He's Muslim. He's the Antichrist. There's a lot of, arguments I've heard, all of
Yes.
which could be very well be true, right? But him being like cognitively like not there, like clearly Obama is put
Yeah.
together in his brain, right? Clearly Trump is put together in his mind. Biden, though, like anyone with a brain, even Biden himself without his brain can see that Biden has like some serious mental issues and should not be in any leadership position, any decision making position. This guy could not even decide if he wants pudding or applesauce at the old folks' home, let alone deciding what happens with like a nuclear arsenal. But yet that's the position he's in. So, yeah, this doctor is not out of line in any way whatsoever, stating the complete obvious, which you don't even need to be a doctor to observe.
Well, exactly. And, Trump was in office. They're trying to like get people to 25th Amendment him out of there.
Yeah.
Clearly, you might not like his policies, but he's not insane. He's not
Yeah.
losing his mind. He doesn't have dementia or whatever. And, I would say the same thing, like you mentioned Obama.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things I could go after him for, attack him for, but his mental health and, whether he's cognitively functional is not
Right.
one of them.
Yeah.
But you'll have the media drum this up when it's Trump, bring in their, fictitious experts and make a big deal out of it, but then they totally ignore it when the shoe's on the other foot.
And it's crazy to think that like Biden is like literally the most senile person who ran for president of the Republicans, of the Democrats. Like I can't think of any Democrat who was like seriously running, like one of the 20 who were running, that was less cognitively there than Joe Biden, right? Even people like Bernie Sanders, this guy's like almost 100 years old and is like a socialist. He even had his head screwed on more straight and could speak more articulately than Joe Biden did.
Yeah, same thing. Like, yeah, I think isn't he a little bit older than Biden?
Yeah, he's older than Biden.
But yeah, he also hasn't had 2 brain hemorrhages or anything else. And I might not like his policies, but same thing. At least Bernie Sanders, at least he's not actually losing his mind. He's just already crazy.
Yeah, well, exactly. And there's a difference between being crazy but like cognitively there as opposed to just being like senile, right? Because as crazy as Bernie is with his domestic policy, I wouldn't be as worried with him controlling like nuclear bombs as someone like Joe Biden, who is literally just going to like, go along with whatever someone says or just make up a scenario in his mind. Like, I think someone told me Russia declared war on us. Let's nuke Moscow. Go, go. I'm commander in chief. Do it. Bernie Sanders maybe would destroy this country faster than Biden, but not through he went to it by accident, which maybe makes it better. I don't know.
Yeah. Whereas President Brandon might just get mad, lash out at somebody because he's having an episode. And then before we know it, there's warheads in the sky. What was it? General Milley, talked about like sabotaging Trump. That he would,
Milley?
Yeah, Milley.
Oh, Milley. Okay.
That he would warn China if we were going to strike or whatever.
Yeah.
And, I really do want somebody there like that, in the Biden administration now, the Biden regime.
Exactly.
I want to
speed. Come back, man. We need you now more than ever.
Yeah, I mean, maybe now we do need that speed bump to prevent him from launching nukes or doing whatever else to destroy our country.
That's
and
funny.
Speaking of mentally unstable, we also have our transgender assistant secretary of health, Dr. Rachel Levine.
That's Admiral Dr. Assistant Secretary Adam Levine. Not Adam Levine. That's the singer from Maroon 5. Who is this? Rachel Levine.
Yeah, I was trying to remember what Rachel's real first name was before.
Ronald, maybe. Rob. Rachel.
Richard, I think.
Richard.
But don't quote me on that. Sorry if I'm dead naming you.
Yeah, dead name, exactly.
Says we need to empower children and make easier paths for them to get on puberty blockers or access to transgender surgeries.
Coming straight from the top. This is coming straight from the White House, that we need to ensure that children can be on puberty blockers. Wow. What a timeline. What a time to be alive, hey?
Yeah, maybe actually we would be better off if Biden just launches the nukes.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe. Like, Putin never tried to turn my kid transgender, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like I've been thinking about that a lot. Those during the Vietnam War, there was like those black guys who'd be like, the Viet Cong never called me the N-word, right? Being like, why are we fighting the Viet Cong when we have a terrible government? And I've just been thinking of that line a lot. But like, with all the different synonyms or all the different whatever you call them, nouns or whatever, where it's like, China never called me a racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe, or whatever. Like Russia's never tried to give my son hormones when he was 5 years old. It's kind of the Biden administration doing all that stuff.
Oh yeah, and again, it's like we've talked about before. They're pushing on every front. It isn't
Yeah.
just the transgenderism and the LGBT agenda and CRT, um, and the policies that are openly crushing everybody. From not from fuel
Yeah.
prices and inflation, food. It's just like anytime there's a decision to be made, they check the box that's most harmful to America.
I know, because ultimately what it is like whatever is good for the middle class relatively hurts the upper class, right? The worse that the middle class is doing means that the more likely they are to be slaves that will take any amount of money. So, say for example, inflation, you're like, well, that hurts everyone. Well, no, it hurts the middle class the most because the upper class has all their money in assets, which go up in value as inflation rises. If you own a $20 million home and inflation makes everything cost twice as much, then guess what? Your home is worth $40 million. You haven't really lost any money at all. However, the poor people who rent property, their rent goes up and they just have to pay more. Their groceries go up, they have to pay more, right? So all these things, their savings account, what little savings they have, that goes down in value. So then what happens is these people become more desperate and are more willing to take jobs for lower prices. They're more willing to work more hours. They're more willing to take two jobs. So all of these things that hurt the middle class and make them lower down on the socioeconomic ladder, that makes them more prone to being slaves and servants to the upper class, which, not to sound like some socialist or something here, but this is just how these upper class people think of like, we want slaves. How do we make them? Hurt the middle class, make them lower class. And that's what they're thinking with all this.
Yeah, and like if you're wealthy or you have assets that you aren't necessary for you to live day-to-day life, even if they lose money on paper, like whether it's stocks or cryptocurrency or whatever, as
Yeah.
long as you don't sell them, you still hold that much of the asset. And
Right.
they know that eventually the market will bounce back. They
Yeah.
also see it as an opportunity. So, and
Well, and what else they do too is like if you look into the empty skyscrapers in New York,
yeah,
there are these skyscrapers that are worth like hundreds of millions of dollars, and like just like the individual suites in them, right? And some of them are entire floors and stuff. They're quite large, but they're worth 100, 200, 500 million dollars. And what these elitists are doing is they're completely empty. They own these properties, but they're empty. And the reason they do this is because they use them almost as trading cards. So they'll say, hey, for your company, I'll give you my luxury house in or my luxury apartment in New York. It's worth $100 million. That way you're trading assets. So there's tax benefits to that. It doesn't go down in value like when there's inflation. So there's a lot of things that these elitists do. I mean, if you could imagine, it's like almost like trading cryptocurrency maybe or something
yeah.
like that, but a harder, less volatile asset maybe. I'm not an economist. I hope I'm using all these words correctly. But basically, what they're doing is they're putting their money in a very safe place that no one else can afford so that they can use it as a trading card for their upper class currency while everyone else loses value in their money.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, they always say like fortunes are made in down economies. And that
Right.
is because like cryptocurrency, for example, like during this crash, like I've sunk a little bit of extra money into it once everything's sunk, because I know that at some point, especially these major coins and assets, they will go back up and they'll make a lot of money on paper. But in the meantime, I don't
Let's
care
go
if things,
Dogecoin.
yeah, yeah. But in the meantime, if they fluctuate a little bit, it doesn't really matter as long as you know that, as long as you're not going to be reliant on that asset. Like if I was needing to sell
Right.
this in 2 months to pay some bill or
Yeah.
whatever, I mean, that's kind of what separates people out from being like wealthy, where you can make
Yeah.
these smarter decisions. Whereas if you're, middle class or whatever, you're living day to day or paycheck to paycheck, you always have these credit card debts and everything else. That's what pins you in. You can't get out of it.
Yeah. And maybe something too to mention is like, obviously, I know you think the same, but I'll speak for myself is like, we have no problem with people being wealthy. And yeah, like a lot of
Yeah.
times, the smarter you are, the more likely you are to be wealthy. The only point I'm trying to make is that it is very advantageous for these people who are extremely wealthy, people like Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and George Soros. It is in their own self interest. It is in their economic interest. It is in their social interest to ensure that the middle class gets hollowed out and that more people from the middle class move down into a more desperate position where they're more likely to take lower wages. Look at with immigration, for example. They would rather import 20 million people from India, not to compete against them and their jobs as innovators and as CEOs, but import them as coders and laborers to compete against us, the American people. And that is another way that they're hollowing out the middle class, devaluing these jobs, devaluing the money and the labor that you offer. So all of these things are in their own best interest to do. It's not to say that it's wrong to be wealthy, but it is wrong to hurt the American people so that you can become more and more and more rich.
Well, it's that partnership between
Yeah.
government and wealthy individuals. That's how monopolies are created. You always need the
Yeah.
police power of government to enforce that. Um,
One.
otherwise, oh, sorry, go
And you
ahead.
do, and I think you do need the government to work in the interest of the American people on an economic level to some extent. Like, for example, we were talking just yesterday privately about my internet and how I only have one internet service provider, and there is literally no other internet service provider that I can get in my whole area. So no matter what they want to charge, they're allowed to charge it, which is why my rates are twice as high as Mike's. And it's why I have terrible internet speed because they don't care about the service they give. Terrible customer service, high prices, low quality service. Why? Because it's the exact same thing you would get with communism, where there's only one option and there is nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, exactly. And that is again like with the elites or these tech industry giants. That's how they play the game.
Yeah.
Is they use these rules to make it hard for any competition to appear, and then if they do, they can like drag things out in court. Don't allow them to grow. They can
Right.
use the power of government to
Or
cripple opposition.
or coordinate. I think that's kind of like what you were saying too. Like, yes, there's coordination between government and companies, but also companies and companies where, like, gas prices will be fixed by all the oil companies so that they can all make more money. Or internet service providers will say, okay, I'll stay out of your area. If you stay out of mine, we'll both charge twice as much and no one can stop us, right? That's in both of their own self-interest. A libertarian might even argue that the businesses have a interest in providing the most amount of profit to their shareholders. So they're acting in a moral way and they're acting in a legally permissible way. And they may even be legally obligated to act in that way because that's how you give the most money to your shareholders. But I disagree with that because it hurts the American people.
Yeah, and I think there that it is kind of like rides the line. Like there needs to be some
Yeah,
regulation, but also ultimately you do want to have the company act in what's in best interest of the people that invested into
sure.
it. But there
Yeah,
should be lines where it's when you're using your power to bully other companies or using like legal maneuvering to block them. That's where I
right.
start having a problem with it. Or a lot of these again public-private partnerships where it's really just using the strength
Mm.
of the government to bully rather than compete.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and speaking of the partnership between the government and other organizations, you have these giant NGOs like the World Health Organization who are making now policies, like as if that's like a legitimate thing, about gender that is now going to be like supposedly or presumably imposed onto the U.S. and other nations. Mike, tell us a little bit about this story.
well, the WHO now believes gender is a spectrum. Um, So again, this is kind of again the leftist game that we always see, whether you're talking like academics, whoever, where you block out your opposition, you have everyone else write the papers, the what's the term I'm looking for, the scientific research papers, peer-reviewed journals,
Right.
and you block anyone else that disagrees with that. And this is kind of the same idea there. So now the WHO issues this statement, and then agencies within different governments and private organizations will point to this as they make rules or make pushes forward. And eventually, saying something different will be considered hate speech.
Yeah, and what's concerning as well about the WHO, the World Health Organization, making these policies is it's going to be framed as a health issue, which is something that most people will not be able to, won't feel comfortable standing in the way of, or governments will have restrictions that they can't stand in the way of. It's similar to, for example, in Canada, people's gender identity is a constitutionally protected right, but that has major implications to the point where if you don't identify your child in the way that they would like insofar as their pronouns or their gender identity. Meaning, if you have a child who's like 5 years old and they say, hey, mom, I'm a girl, but they're a boy, you have to call them a girl. And if you don't, you're violating their human rights on the basis of their health and medical needs. So CPS, the laws were written by normal common sense people who said if you're taking your child's health away from them and you're harming their physical health, like you shouldn't have your kids anymore. But then they intertwine gender identity and health together so that can be pushed through in all these regulations that already exist. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and in some places now, if you even question that can be considered child abuse, or it's treated as if it's child abuse by
Right.
judges.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cases in Texas, of all places, of this happening. Outside Austin, and is it outside the Houston areas where the other one is?
I
That's
believe so.
okay. But yeah, again, it's something we see over and over again. It's leftism just pushed this way for a party that again claims to give the science. They don't want to look at DNA as science.
No, absolutely not. And it's the same thing with abortion, where they say, a baby's life doesn't begin at conception, or a human life doesn't begin at conception. It's like it literally does, though. Like, how on earth could you come to the conclusion that new human DNA is not a new human life? It makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever.
Well,
Like dad's DNA, your mom's DNA makes new DNA. That's a new human life. It's so simple, and yet people deny this. And it's the same thing with gender, like you said.
Well, I've seen a push now that they want to start saying like human life begins when you can hold memories, which is at like 3 months
Three.
after, yeah, 3 months after birth. So this is what the push is going to be now for. Well, they're already, what are they calling it? They're not calling it infanticide. It's post-birth abortion or whatever to kill the infant. So the push now is going to be to allow this for up to the fourth trimester to go with Cartman's mom's definition. So
Jeez.
yeah, up to 3 months after a child's born, you can have them liquidated if you decide you don't want to keep them.
It's just insane that we, define the value of life by whatever a mom feels, whatever some woman feels, that's what life is worth. You know what I mean? Like if the mom decides her baby should live, then it shall live. And if she decides it shouldn't, then she shouldn't. And this is something that like people thought was terrible of kings and queens. Like, how can a king decide who lives and dies? They probably had way better reason than some mom who's like, I want to drink and smoke cigarettes, so I'm going to kill my baby. It's like, that's actually not a very good reason to kill a child. I actually can't think of any good reason to kill a baby.
Well,
Like it blows my mind.
again, especially like after the child's been born. Again, it's even worse than abortion because at this point, in 9 months or close to it, child's born. All of a sudden, a week later, you decide, they cry too much at night. I don't want to take care of them. Let's go
Yeah,
throw them in the wood chipper.
I know, and you could like legally. Like as of now, obviously there's no laws that allow you to put babies in wood chippers. But I mean, this is what some people are advocating for, that you should be able to have a post-birth abortion. Which I mean, even saying that sounds ridiculous to me. But I mean, how the thing is that women think, or not women, but pro-choice people think that a woman who's pregnant, one day before she gives birth, it's not a baby, it's not a human, kill it, no problem. And then one day after she gives birth, that's a real human being, do everything we can to protect it, has human rights, has all the rights of an American citizen. And it's like there actually hasn't been much change in that 24-hour time period. It just changed locations. But yet we as Americans, unfortunately, we often assign different value because we can't physically see it or whatever. So the fact that we've already came to the conclusion that abortion up until birth is acceptable, it wouldn't surprise me if people start trying to justify post-birth abortions at some point as well.
Well, again, they already are trying to push this kind of legislation through in at least 4 states. And like the way the law works in California is they just are not going to allow law enforcement to investigate infant homicide cases, basically, from a certain period. Like I kind of like jokingly said before, it's like, does this apply to the kid's father too? If the kid's father decides to want to pay child support and goes over
Yeah.
and kills the kid, is that just fine?
Yeah, well, yeah, and why does the father not have a say then either? Not like we're advocating for the father to be able to kill
Yeah.
his child, but it's like, what is the reasoning that they have? Do they just really want? Maybe because most dads wouldn't want to kill their own child, and it's like these moms with all these hormones going on through them. All the girls watching now are so mad, but it's like maybe it's because of the hormones. There's like that. There's a condition when you just give birth where you go crazy. What's it called? It's an
Like
actual medical condition.
postpartum depression.
Yes, exactly. So I don't know. I don't know if that's the reason why they push so hard for girls to do this. Maybe it's because they're more emotional. I don't know. Although I know there is probably a lot of guys who would want to kill their babies too, but maybe more. I don't know. The whole thing is just mess. We shouldn't even have to talk about a subject like this.
Well, yeah, and the fact that it's like as many people as it is, that's what's scary. Is we're not talking again about like an outlier. That there's an actual movement within California. What was it, Maine or no, sorry, not Maine. Um, Denver, California, or Colorado, California.
Some liberal state.
Yeah, I
What do
can't
they want
remember
to
now.
do?
Sorry, that are pushing these post-birth abortion bills.
Yeah, it's
Um,
insane.
yeah,
Well, and it's upsetting because like where have we gone as in a country as to the point where we think that this is acceptable? And to tie this back to what we said earlier, it's because they can tie this into health,
yeah,
right? And they try to make abortion a healthcare issue. They say this all the time: abortion is healthcare. Miley Cyrus, she had a cake. Sounds kind of funny, a cake, and she wrote on it, "Abortion is healthcare." It's a very common sentiment among pro-abortion people because they know, like in Canada, these liberals and Satanists in Canada who intertwine gender identity with health, that has major implications for what you have to do. The leadway that the government has to do with your child, then it's the same thing with abortion, where if it's healthcare, well, you can't get in the way of healthcare, and there is, a physician, not client. What do they call patients?
yes.
Confidentiality. You can't violate their privacy. Like there's all these implications if abortion is considered healthcare and not murder, which it is murder.
Yeah, and again, it's manipulating the legal system
Yeah.
to for their favorable outcome
Yeah.
and using it as a weapon instead of how it's designed. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's the way the left does see the law as a way to enact their will, um, rather than something to protect individuals and protect their rights.
Well, and people are so dishonest too. I remember I had a history professor who said abortion should be legal because the 14th Amendment protects it. And the 14th Amendment says no person shall be deprived of life. No person born or naturalized in the United States should be deprived of life, liberty, or happiness without, or property rather, without due process of law, right? And she said, "Ha! So the mother was born in America and is naturalized in America and is a citizen, but the baby isn't. And why should her rights be less or equal to the baby's then?" And I remember thinking, well, this could be used as an argument for why I should be allowed to go around killing immigrants because they're not born or naturalized in the US and I was. Therefore, I have rights that they don't have. So I have the right to kill them. And that makes it okay. Like, but see, liberals don't want to have any consistencies. They just want to use whatever arguments they possibly can pull together, like throwing crap at the wall and seeing what sticks. And they don't give a hoot about the Constitution or consistency. They just want to justify their baby murder.
Well, they are consistent with wanting to deny people personhood, whether it's babies
Yeah, fair
or
enough.
slaves and former slaves. That's always what it is. It's always self-centered. It's always all about them and not about everyone else or society, even though they try to play that card that socialism make us all equal, blah, blah, blah. In reality, it's always just their self-centered nature.
Yeah.
It was in their best interest to not have slaves have the right to vote and then to continue to control them and not have to give them other human rights and basic rights or constitutional rights.
Right.
So they pushed for slavery, and now it's babies and abortion. Same thing. They want to deny personhood, so to deny them rights.
Right, exactly. Well, and the reality is we're not all equal. Like, it's like when people say, "Oh, the founding fathers said all men are created equal." It's like, okay, what do you mean? Like everyone's 6 foot tall, handsome, and gorgeous like me? Like obviously not, right? Like not everyone is the same height and the same weight. Not everyone's the same IQ. Not everyone is equal in the way that liberals like to think. All men are created equal. It means we're made equal in value. It means that we shouldn't be seen as property, right? Obviously, it means that we should all have some basic human rights, which of course we should have basic human rights. And the left wants to take that and pretend like, oh no, equality means we're all the exact same in every way and all of us should be treated the exact same way. It's like, no, short people should not be on the NBA because they're not as in the NBA because they're not good at basketball. Tall people should be. And likewise, tall people probably shouldn't be like, I don't know, minors or whatever, because they're too tall to fit in small crevices. I don't know. I'm sure there's things for short people that they're good at, right? So it's like, look, I can acknowledge that we're not all equal. Not all American people are equal, but we're all brothers and sisters. And that's why I stand up and fight for the American people. It doesn't have to do with whether we're equal in intelligence or in looks or in appearance or in behaviors. It has to do with whether we are related as an extended family. And that's what a nation is.
Yeah. So the left conflates equal opportunity and equal outcome. We're all entitled to the same opportunity to pursue our happiness, improve our lives, and everything else. The left wants the outcome to be the same, which is impossible. Because at certain points, certain things are left to chance. They're left to your connections or how hard you work to get there. And you're regardless, you're not going to have an equal outcome across the line. And maybe, it is an innate characteristic about somebody is why they don't have as many people that follow them or listen to them or whatever. Or maybe it was, they have an accent. They were born elsewhere and they aren't taken as seriously if they get into the political realm.
Right.
It doesn't really matter, though. You still have that opportunity to make with it what you can. There's no way to actually regulate total equality.
Right. And I would say it's not even possible to regulate total equal opportunity in some aspects. Like, for example, so the argument would be like communism, everyone owns everything. Like if you own a business, I should own a business, right? Maybe a more American way of looking at it is equal opportunity. Both of us have a chance to open a business and we both have loans to open a business. I think in like the real life, maybe you're way better with money. So the bank should not even lend me money and give me the chance to open a business because of the actions I've taken in life. So it's still deserved and everything, right? There's nothing unjust. But even with that, I think you're totally right in saying that there can't be a possibility of everyone getting equal outcome. I think in 100% of cases, it's impossible to get equal opportunity as well. Although in the vast majority of cases, people do have equal opportunity to succeed in America. And if you don't have if you're not as likely to succeed in one thing as someone else, you will be even more likely to succeed in something else than everyone else. Everyone has their own gifts.
See, I would argue that you do still have the equal opportunity across the board because you still have the opportunity, like in the example you gave, to like keep your credit up and not make bad decisions beforehand that affect you later in life. We
Right.
both had the same opportunity to do that. You just went one path, and in this argument, I went the other.
Right.
Um, but we both still had that same opportunity to apply for the same loan, but it's decisions, the individual decisions that we made that lead to two different outcomes for this business loan. And
Yeah,
that's what the left
exactly.
doesn't seem to understand. Is they want, criminals, same thing. They want to like whitewash their past. They say, oh, these things shouldn't be hung over their head. And I agree with them to a certain extent when it comes to like minor, like white collar crimes, or if somebody, one time when they're 19 makes a mistake and ends up with a felony drug charge. They shouldn't have that like follow. There should be a path to redemption that doesn't cost them a fortune, $10,000 to have it expunged.
Right.
There should be a path to redemption. But you're talking like hardened criminals are in and out of jail. Sorry about your luck, but yeah, no more right to vote. You can't own a gun, and you're gonna miss out on other rights
Right.
because of
Yeah. Like
decisions you made.
employment opportunity, for example. And I
Yeah,
think like we're saying the same thing just in a different way that like, your actions have consequences. So, because I know some people like if there's any libs watching, they'll say there is no equal opportunity because a felon can't apply to the same job as you. He's not as likely to get it. That's not equal opportunity. But yeah, like we're saying, that's because of your own actions, though. That's because you have made choices in your life. And maybe there are even some situations where you didn't have a choice in life. Maybe you were born disabled or something, right? And that
yeah.
has excluded you from going to Harvard University. Okay, like maybe you won't have the option to do that. You can still technically apply or whatever, but we all know that you're not going to get in. But there's other things in life that you can succeed at, and there's nothing wrong with people being born different and being gifted at different things and pursuing those different things. And that's why I said the end all be all should not be equality. It should be understanding that we are a part of an extended family and need to help each other out and use our gifts to benefit one another, as opposed to just saying everyone needs to be equal.
Yeah, and actually make a good point with the Harvard example there. So, yeah, there are going to be outliers no matter what we do that the same rules don't apply to, but you can't make the rule just for the
Yes.
outliers. And that's
Yeah.
again another habit of the left is
Hmm.
instead of talking about what would benefit 98.2% of the population, they want to look at the other,
Yeah.
1.8% and make laws that focus on them
Yeah.
and the problem they see there
They
instead of being more realistic.
they do it all the time. Every issue with immigration, it's like, well, what if the person is like in Saudi Arabia and they're like a Christian and they were being hunted down by the government and then they were like raped by a gang of like Muslims or something. I mean, I guess the left wouldn't make that argument, but
Yeah.
like a real like a legitimate case, right? Where we're like, oh, okay. Or like the South African farmers, they're being hunted down and killed because they're white or whatever. It's like, okay, there are some legitimate cases, but 99% of those cases that we're dealing with insofar as refugees and asylum seekers are not those cases,
Yeah,
okay?
they're economic.
And yeah, exactly. And then with the cases of abortion, where it's like, well, what about rape and incest? That's 0.6% of all abortions, supposedly. Could even
Yeah.
be less, but that's what they claim. 0.6% maximum, okay? So what about the 99%? They're trying to always use the exception. Every single issue. Same with gun violence. Oh, school shootings, right? Every single political issue, they always try to define by the exception to the rule, not the general rule.
Yeah, exactly. And that's again, they know that exception will tug on your
Yeah,
heartstrings. And maybe with some of these, we do need to alter a law for that exception or make a special case for them.
right.
But it's not the main argument, and it shouldn't
Mhm.
be what we're basing all policy and legislation about.
Yeah,
Um, immigration, same thing. Is if we wanted to create a special rule to help somebody that's being discriminated against or has their life in danger that left the country, fine. There should be an application process for that. But it doesn't mean we also need to allow like broad, open immigration for the entire Middle East or all of South
right.
America or wherever just because.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I mean, that's how they have to define and frame every single issue is trying to use the exception to define the rule. Because if they went by generalizations, like they would be in a really, really rough spot as
Yeah.
Democrat. I mean, and this is about voting. One final example, and then we'll transition into this next story. With voting, it's the same thing too, where people want to say, on the left, well, some people don't have IDs. So voter ID laws should not be allowed. And it's like, okay, but 99% of people do have IDs. And if you're not smart enough to get an ID, you probably shouldn't be voting. So
Exactly.
let's not use the 1% or whatever, or less than 1%, to define the entire rule for all people. Let's make the rule. And then, like Mike said, maybe we can carve out some exceptions within the general rule, but the general rule has to stay no matter what.
Exactly. The voting ID one is a really good example just because at this stage in the game, like you have to have an ID to walk in any government building. You have to have one to buy anything from a gun to a fifth of vodka.
Mhm.
So I just don't buy the excuse
Or
anymore
to
that
get a job.
or to get a job or anything else. So I just don't buy the excuse. Like I understand where it came from originally, where these little towns in the South that the Democrat sheriff wouldn't let anybody that was black get an ID or register to vote. So they would make unjust laws that prevented people from getting basic identification. Um, so yes, it stemmed out of something that was originally a problem, but that is not the way it is today. You can't tell me that somebody walks into a DMV in any state in this country that they cannot walk out with an identification as long as they brought in what they need to have.
Dude, I wish I could go into a DMV and they would deny me service because of my race, because then I could sue them and make like $20 million. I'd be set for life. I would not care about politics anymore. Well, I personally would still care about politics.
Yeah.
But the average person would be like, voting, who cares? I'm rich. I got millions of dollars.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know what the Biden administration's problem is with hiring perverts, but it looks like we've got another one. Biden's USPS chief of mail-in ballot unit was arrested for trying to meet a young boy for sex.
Wow. And like I said, we talked about this at the top of the show. It goes to the very top, this weird pedophilia stuff. This doesn't happen in like normal, middle class areas. I mean, it does happen, but I mean, it rarely happens in like your neighborhood, in your suburb. This happens every day in Washington. This happens every day in like the White House. It's insane how often it happens in the upper class or in these elitist circles, I should say, especially in Washington.
Yeah, and nobody should be surprised. I mean, I have this picture up just to illustrate the other people and Hunter Biden within the Biden regime right now that are, let's just go with weirdos that haven't been arrested or charged with any crimes yet.
Can you go through the, just like left to right, who all these people are? So we already talked about Rachel Levine, the Assistant Secretary. I forgot the full title. Levine.
Yeah.
Who's that to the side?
Oh, that's Jen Psaki's replacement, the speaker, or the
I was about to say, not Jen
secretary.
Psaki, the new one.
Yeah, and sorry, I just blanked on her name. It's
no one knows it. No one knows it at all. It's the replacement for Jen Psaki, the press secretary, correct?
Yeah. Well, she'll be out of there soon. And there's Pete Buttigieg, our transportation secretary, with his husband.
Pushing his husband on the swing, it looks like. Very uncomfortable looking photo.
And then the shirtless guy there, that's the guy that's in charge of cleaning up nuclear waste. He works for the Department of Energy. I'm not sure who's in the leather mask there, but we're just going to assume they probably work for the administration too.
Yeah, and I was going to say it's his boyfriend, but I don't know if he's in any long-term relationships. That might just be someone he had met. And then, of course, we have our friend Hunter Biden in the back.
Yeah, kind of an old photo of him. I mean,
a real photo too.
Yeah,
and these are all real photos. None of this is photoshopped. Like, obviously, they're photoshopped in the room, but the photos of the people, that's like the actual waste management guy shirtless with the dog slave. And that is actually Hunter Biden, half naked in the background, wearing a woman's scarf and sunglasses inside.
Yeah, exactly. These are all pictures. Most of these aren't even leaked. These are ones they posted themselves, or they were promo pictures. Yeah. I'm not even 100% sure. I'm sure the Hunter Biden picture's off the laptop, so that was leaked. The rest of these are real, like, photos, and obviously the newspaper was photoshopped.
Right, yeah.
But the rest of this, I mean,
it's insane. What a timeline. Well, I think we have time for our final story here, which is this about it. It's kind of a big story. We might have to cover this next show as well, but why don't you start us off with this?
Yeah, we'll probably be coming back to this, but yeah, the Biden regime awards George Soros-related group $172 million contract to help illegal aliens avoid deportation.
Well, yeah, we should definitely come back to this one because it's a huge story. This will be like a cliffhanger, so people will come back on Thursday to watch the next episode. And I mean, we've seen this how many times where Soros contributes. I mean, his organization is called the Open Society. He wants open borders. He's been open about wanting open borders with the Open Society for a very long time. And he is, again, one of these elitists. I mean, I dropped his name earlier, along with Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, who have a financial interest and a social interest and a personal interest in allowing tons of migration into this country, replacing American people with foreign peoples, and bringing down the job market, destroying social cohesion and other things. It's completely deliberate on his end to do things like this.
Yeah, so this is an effort of another one of his little subgroups. It's the Vera Institute of Justice. So they're going to network, try to push attorneys out that are going to deal strictly with what is the term they're using now? Unaccompanied alien children, UACs. So that'll be the new term you hear for it, to try to, again, desensitize people to what's really going on with the children being smuggled over the border.
Right.
But
And
yeah,
that's funny. That's funny when they want sympathy, they're like undocumented person of color. And then when it's like when they're like smuggling kids in, it's like unaccompanied alien child. It's like the most official term they can use because they want to make it like, don't worry about it. Don't look over here. Look at the look at the undocumented hardworking migrant from El Salvador. Yeah, look at him.
well, and a lot of this, I guess, is going to focus on kids who don't have parents or other relatives here that otherwise they're just going to end up flooding our, our um, child protective services. What's the word I'm looking for? All of our orphanages, and they're all
Yeah,
going to be
like
wards of the state, basically.
yeah, all of those resources that are used to protect American children, of course, will be completely taken up entirely, 100% by foreign peoples who just drop their kids off here. But even more importantly than that is the fact that the number one place that kids get sold from is from outside of America because when they come into the US, they don't have birth certificates, they don't have passports, they don't have social security numbers, they don't have any identification. No one knows where they are. You steal an American kid, they have a birth certificate, they have parents, they have like the local police looking for them. It's very hard to like kidnap and get away with stealing an American kid and selling them. But a foreigner, where like the parents don't know where they are, they just say, "Get my kid to America from Mexico," and then smugglers sell these kids. Like it is a major issue. These unaccompanied children who come here, they usually are accompanied not by their parents, but by smugglers or traffickers, human traffickers, who will then sell them to Jeffrey Epstein or other elitists.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's just to build up sympathy, so people assume that this is the only thing coming over the border is these poor little kids, not all these military age fighting men. Um, that are also flooding, or the drugs and every. I mean, it's just a total breakdown. It's
Yeah.
literally an invasion. Like, if you want to
Oh yeah.
destabilize a country, this is how you do it. 18,000 people a day cannot be absorbed. So
Oh, I
this,
know.
and then the school districts that these kids go to, a lot of those end up broke because all of a sudden they need
Well,
bilingual teachers. And
and it's like imagine if for example like what are two countries that are always fighting like Russia, Ukraine, like Palestine and Israel. Like let's say like Palestine were to send, let's say in Israel there lived a Palestinian guy who was spending billions of dollars bringing tons of like Africans and Palestinians into Israel, and then when they wanted to kick them out he was spending tons of money to make sure they could stay, and that was resulting in more crime and more drugs and more murders and more rapes of Israeli citizens. Like the government in Israel would be like, "Hey, you are a toxic parasite in our nation. You are trying to destroy our people. You should be put in prison." And they would rightfully think so. And yet, when we're dealing with someone like George Soros or some of these other like internationalists who have no loyalty to America, who I consider to be total internationalists, who have no loyalty to any nation at all, just their own
yeah,
bank accounts and whatever city they live in that day, like we need to step up and take that same approach where we say, you are a terrible person. You're trying to destroy our nation, destroy our people. You're bringing drugs, crime, and like the most heinous crimes into this nation. You got to be arrested or just gotten rid of.
yeah, and unfortunately, we just don't have laws to do that or ways to do that. And that's part of when they have that much money, they can hire a whole
Yeah.
team of lawyers and use legal maneuvering to prevent charges. I
Well,
mean, there's
and they'll
warrants out
flee
for.
too.
Yeah,
If there was ever charges brought, he'd just be gone. He'd go back to Hungary or whatever and live there.
well, yeah, I think Hungary is one of the countries that has a warrant out for his arrest. I know there's a.
So
Yeah,
he
there.
won't be going there because Hungary. I mean, Viktor Orban, he actually has his stuff figured out a little better than in the U.S. Tucker Carlson interviewed him recently, or a few months ago, and it was a very good interview. But it looks like all the time we have.
Yeah,
We should have started this story because there's so much to talk about. So we'll probably bring this up next show as well. So please join us on Thursday for that. And you can find us on all platforms at punchingleft.com. Subscribe to us on Telegram to get all of our announcements and be notified when we upload new videos. We're also working on another project over on Lindell TV, and you can be sure to hear about that as well in the Telegram channel. So please subscribe to that at punchingleft.com. With all that said, that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you all for joining. God bless each and every one of you guys, and take care.
yeah. Thanks again. We'll see everybody soon.